Hello, hello class. Today once again I'm your honorary ma'am, and today we are going to deal with your lesson number 5, supplementary, part 1, footprints without feet. In this, we will come to know that there is a one character named Griffin. He is a scientist. He invent a very beautiful thing that with the help of his invention, people can be invisible. But in what way he is using his power, that we will see in this chapter, and how your you know how you use your power in negative way and how it will harm to you, that we will see in that. If you have something good, some power, or rather we can say that some different thing than the other, if you are using them in a positive way, then it will be a blessing. But if you are using your power, your authority in a negative way, then it will become curse. This is the main story of this lesson, main moral of this lesson. So I hope you liked it and you will get lots of things from this lesson. Yes, Footprints Without Feet by H.G. Wells. He is the author. Okay, let's see. Yes, Herbert George Wells. He was born in 21st September 1866 and he died at 13 August 1946. He was an English writer. He was prolific in many genres, writing dozens of novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, satire, biography, and autobiography. So basically, he was English writer. He was very prolific writer. He was very prolific in many genres, or rather, you can many genres. Genres, okay, like many genre like writing dozens of novels, short stories, and works of social commentary, satire, biography, and autobiography. And even 2 books on recreational war games. He is now best remembered for his science fiction novels and is often called the father of science fiction. So basically, he was best known for the science fiction novel and he was called the father of science fiction along with Jules Verne. Jules Verne and Hugo Jans Beck. So this is the overall the introduction of your introduction of the author. Now come to the introduction of the lesson. So the story is about a scientist named Griffin. So basically this is a story regarding a character Griffin. He discovers the rare chemicals which can make a man invisible. So this is his discovery, that he discovered one chemical which can make man invisible. But at the same time, the man can be touched and felt physically. But you can touch and feel the person physically. Let's read and find out how he used or misused his power for his own. Now how he will use it in uses or misuses, that we will see. Yes. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh, muddy imprints of a pair of a bare feet. What was a barefooted man doing on the step of a house in the middle of London? And what was the man? As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. Now, two boys suddenly noticed a few muddy imprints of a bare feet. Now they started wondering that what was a barefoot man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London. So this is story which is set in middle of London, and two boys suddenly noticed a few muddy imprints of a bare feet, and they started wondering that what are they doing in the middle of the London. They also started thinking that where was the man, as he was nowhere to be seen. They are also surprised because bare feet imprints are there, but no one is seeing over there. So they are surprised too that where was the man, as he was nowhere to be seen. As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. They suddenly show another footmark. Okay, and all of a sudden, they guessed because a remarkable sight met their eyes. Now, what they seen, that we will see. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. Further footprints followed one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at last disappeared altogether. Now they suddenly show another footmark. The man was still not visible. Man is not seeing, but they are seeing the footmarks. They started following the footprints. They followed them until the footprints become invisible. You know, that lesser, and at the right, at some extent, you won't be able to find it. It become invisible. So they are started following that footmarks, but man was not visible. They started following the footprints. They followed them until the footprints became invisible, fainter, and invisible. They had been following the footprints. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Griffin, the scientist, had carried out an experiment after experiment to prove that human body you could become invisible. Now, it is a simple logic that they had been following a scientist who had discovered how to make the human body transparent or invisible. Now they are seeing footprints, but human being is invisible. No one is seeing. So now they clarify us here that they had been following a scientist who had discovered how to make human body transparent or invisible, and it was a Griffin. He was the scientist who had been working for a long time to see how to make the human body invisible. So it's a now we come across that the boys followed a person who is not seeing. They are talking about an invisible man, and that invisible man was a griffin who had just discovered the theory of who had just discovered how to make a human body transparent or invisible. He was a griffin, he was a scientist, and he had been working for this very long time to see how to make the human body invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain red drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass. Through it also remained as solid as glass. Brilliant scientist, though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. Now, suddenly one day, he consumed certain drugs which made his body invisible. Though it could be felt, Griffin was a lawless person, as he had once burned down the house of his landlord, and who was trying to throw him out of the house. So, he was a brilliant scientist. Griffin was rather a lawless person. He has a moral and lawful person. So his landlord disliked him and he really tried to eject him, means try to out of that house. Once upon what happened, he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, and though it is also remained as solid as glass. Now brilliant scientist, though he started become a lawless person and his landlord started disliking him. In revenge, so he tried out to. Griffin was a lawless person and he has once burned down burned down the house of his landlord who because his landlord was trying to throw him out of the house. So in a revenge, Griffin set fire to the house to get away without being seen. He had to remove his clothes. Thus it was that he became a homeless wanderer without clothes, without money, and quite invisible until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. Now, what happened? He burned down the house of his landlord, who was trying to throw him out of the house, and then, as he wanted to be invisible, he had to remove his clothes and then roam around without clothes and without money. Without clothes and without money. Because if he wore a clothes, then clothes can be seen, though he was invisible. So that is why he has to left his clothes. So he was roaming around without clothes and also without money. Now his presence was felt after he stepped in some mud and his footprints could be seen as he walked. Now where we come across the idea that his presence was there when he was felt after he stepped in some mud and his footprints could be seen as he walked. At that time we come across the idea that there is someone who is there but not seen or a invisible form. Yes. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. Okay. But his adventure were by no means over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter, the air was bitterly cold, and he could not do without clothes. Now, he easily escaped the boys who had followed him, but he had many more adventures coming up. He had chosen a bad time to wander in London as it was winter season going on and the air was bitterly cold. So, though he was invisible, he was not visible. He is invisible, but he he has that feeling because he was not seen to anyone, but he was there as a person and he has feeling. And now the time he chose, that was bad because that was the winter season going on and the air was bitterly cold. And he cannot do without clothes. He won't be able to survive. Instead of walking about the street, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. Closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. Now, what happened? He decides to stay inside a store for warmth. As he went inside the store, and closing time arrived. The doors of the stores were shut and nobody was there inside. He got food to eat and wore new clothes without paying for. Okay, so he didn't need anything. Okay, he didn't need money to pay for a cloth, for a such a dishes because he was invisible. So he entered in the store for a warmth, and though as he was invisible, okay, so they are soon close the doors of that particular uh, store, and after that he will give clothes. After that he will have clothes and food without any kind of expense or paying to other. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. Soon, with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide brimmed hat, he became a fully dressed and visible person in the kitchen of the restaurant. Now, what happened? As he went inside the store and closing time arrived, the doors of the stores were shut and nobody was there inside. So he got food to eat and wore new clothes without paying for that. He became visible again as he wore shoes, overcoat, and a hat. Overcoat and a hat. He then found cold meat and coffee in the kitchen and ate them. Kitchen of the restaurant. Okay. Kitchen of the restaurant and ate them. And ate them. Fully dressed and visible person in the kitchen of the restaurant and started eating over there. He found cold meat and coffee and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. Finally, he settled down to sleep on a pile of quills. So,
he found cold he found over there cold meat and coffee in the kitchen and ate them. After that, he also had a sweets and wine from the grocery store. Then he slept on the pile of quilts kept nearby and could not wake up on a time. So he started eating and then he found very good place for himself. So he started sleeping over there and he forgot to wake up. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in good time, all might have been well. As it was, he did not wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. When he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. Now, next morning, what happened when the assistants came and started approaching him? He became nervous and started running away. Uh, if he was able to wake up early in the morning at the very prior time, then he will not to pay this. But next morning when the assistants came and started approaching him, he became nervous and started running away. Then the assistants started chasing him as well. He escaped only because he quickly removed his new clothes. Okay, so when he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. He started running away because he won't be able to understand what to do, what not to do, so he started running. They naturally gave chase. In the end, he was able to escape only by quickly taking off his newly found clothes. So once more, he found himself invisible but naked in the chill January air. So now what happened? He escaped only because he quickly removed his new clothes. Again, he is invisible and naked without any money in the chill air of January. Now, if he wants to be invisible, then he has to leave his clothes, and now he become invisible again, but naked and without any money in the chill air of the January. This time he decided to try the stock of the theatrical company in the hope of finding not only clothes but also something that would hide the empty space above his shoulders. Shivering with cold, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of the theater world. He soon found a suitable shop. Now this time he decided to try the clothing of the theatrical world, as he knew that he would surely find something there to cover his face with. He quickly reached Ajureland, the center of the theatrical world, as he was shivering with a cold, and he found a shop according to his needs and he entered in it. Now he decided that this time he is try the clothing of the theatrical world, as he knew that he would surely find something there to cover his face with, because he has to put something on his face. He quickly reached Jureland, the center of the theatrical world, as he was shivering with a cold because it's a January air and he was naked, so obviously he was shivering with a cold. He found a shop according to his needs and he entered in it. He came out He made his way invisible upstairs and came out later Little later, wearing bandages around his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat. Now, what happened? He found a shop according to his needs and he entered in it. He came out wearing bandages around his foreheads, false nose he made, and side whiskers and a hat. So he finally get a dress up like this. So he made his way because he is invisible. So he go upstairs and come out little later wearing bandages around his face, around his forehead. He used to wear means dark glasses, false nose, big bushy sides whiskers, and a large hat he put on his hand. To escape without being seen, he callously attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him of all the money he could find. Eager to get away from crowded London, he took a train to the village of Eppling, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. Now, then, as he did not have any money, he attacked the shopkeeper and robbed him of all his money. Then he felt that London was too crowded and he decided to go to a small village nearby, Iping. So he took a train and booked 2 rooms in the local inn of that village. Now, if you are living in this crowded people in this city time, then it is full of people and he won't be able to find he won't be able to secure his identity. So that is why he decides to go to he first attacked the shopkeeper, robbed him of his all money, and then he felt that London was too crowded, so he decides to go to a small village nearby Iping, and he took a train and booked 2 rooms in the local inn of that village. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. Now he, he took a train and booked 2 rooms in the local inn. Now the event of stranger coming and staying at the inn in the winter night was not normal thing to happen in Iping. And everybody started talking about it also because Griffin looked very strange, as if he's looking very strange. And any kind of a person coming in this kind of, a small town in this particular location or particular winter night, it is not normal thing to happen in this village of Iping. And everybody started talking about it, also because Griffin looked very strange. So he became the talk of the town because no one seen such a weird person in their life. Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, made every effort to be friendly, but Griffin had no desire to talk and told her, "My reason for coming to Iping is a desire for solitude. I do not wish to be disturbed in my work. Besides, an accident has affected my face." Satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, and in view of the fact that he had paid her in advance. Now, what happened? That the landlord of the inn where Griffin stayed, Mrs. Hall, the name of the landlord is Mrs. Hall, made a lot of efforts to be friendly with Griffin, but he did not want to talk. and he clearly told her that his reason for coming to Epping was for peace and quietness, and he did not wish to be disturbed in his work also. He told her that an accident had affected his face, due to which he had to cover it. So the landlord, Mrs. Hall, tried to friendly with him, but he did not wanted to talk with him. He clearly told her that his reason for coming this village, I think, was for peace and quietness. So he don't want any disturbance, and he did not wish to disturb in his work also. He told her that an accident had affected his face, so he was met with an accident, and that accident was affected his face, due to which he had to cover his face. So he didn't want any kind of disturbance. Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper, but the stolen money did not last long, and presently Griffin had not to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. The landlord's wife, Mrs. Hall, accepted that her new guest was a strange scientist and was ready to excuse his temper and habits, as he had paid her in advance. Then the time came when his money was over and he had no ready cash available. For further payment at the inn, he had to pretend that he was waiting for a check which could arrive at any moment. And then something really strange happened. So he hasn't enough that much money. So now his money was going to be end, and that is why he has to uh, pretend like that he hasn't money right now, but he is waiting for a check to come, as we all know that there wasn't any check which is coming, but still he said that he was waiting for a check which arrived at any moment. So he is pretending like that. Shortly afterward, a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noise in the study. Creeping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk without making any noise, and with a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door, surrender. Now, as we all know that something really strange happened. Now, what happened? The clergyman and his wife were awakened by some noise in their study room. Okay, there is something happened in that clergyman's house. So his wife and clergyman uh, awakened by some noise in their study room. When they were coming downstairs, they could hear the sound of money. When they were coming downstairs, they could hear the sound of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. They hear the sound that someone is opening their desk and taking money from that. The clergyman held a metal rod in his hand and flung the door open. He held a metal rod in his hand and he flung the door open. And as soon as he opened the door, he said that surrender, as he thought he had caught a thief. So he said surrender, but he didn't know that his thief is invisible. He won't be able to see him. So Now, what happened that we will see in the next part. So this is how we come across that how Griffin was trying to save himself from this kind of troubles.